We don't need you, take that wreck. My daughter-in-law sneered. A week later, she was knocking on my door. When my husband died, I folded his flannel shirts into neat rectangles and packed them in the cedar chest beneath the guest bed. That was the first quiet goodbye. The second came 2 weeks later, when I moved into Tyler and Megan's home, a sleek, open-concept house with silent drawers and voice-activated lights. It didn't creak like our old place. It didn't hold echoes. They said it was temporary. Megan smiled and said I'd be a blessing with the kids. Tyler hugged me hard and quick. The guest room had no closet, just 2 floating shelves and a folding chair. I brought only what fit in the back of the car, a small suitcase, 2 tins of tea, and a framed photo of our wedding day. I filled my days with usefulness. Made banana bread on Fridays. Kept the laundry baskets empty. Sat on the floor with Ellie and Sam while Megan took calls upstairs. When the kids fell asleep, I washed the dishes and turned off lights she always left on. They thanked me, sometimes. Megan's gratitude came as a thin smile or a quick nod. Tyler gave absent pats on the shoulder as he passed through. And when I pressed an envelope of grocery cash into Megan's hand one Tuesday, she took it without comment. The next day, she told a friend over speakerphone that I was a little too involved. Still, I ignored the tension. Families adjust, I told myself. Grief makes things fragile. I kept folding towels into thirds the way Megan liked and used the chipped white plate for myself so the others matched. I was useful. I was quiet. Then one evening, Megan glanced at my plate and muttered, "Maybe someday we'll have a set that actually matches." She didn't look up. She said it like she was talking to herself. But the words landed hard. Not angry. Not loud. Just sharp in that way women cut each other when they still want to be polite. I cleared the plates without comment. Washed that chipped dish carefully. Dried it with a towel that smelled like their fabric softener. Upstairs, I heard Megan laughing on the phone. And in that soft, domestic clatter of post-dinner silence, something shifted inside me. Not anger. Not sadness. Just the beginning of something quiet and deep. It's strange how silence changes shape. At first, it was soft, a kind of relief from the noise of grief. Later, it hardened into something more like distance, a long hallway where voices echo but never reach you. After Megan's comment about the plates, things settled into a new pattern. Not louder, just tighter. Her smiles got shorter. Tyler got busier. And I began to notice all the small ways I'd been moved out of the frame. The pantry shelf I used was now filled with protein bars and toddler snacks. My tins of tea were pushed to the back behind a wall of collagen powders. The laundry baskets I once kept empty now sat full for days, until Megan reminded me they weren't really my responsibility. She said it like a kindness, but her tone carried a border. One afternoon, I took Ellie to the park. She wanted to try the big slide, the one with the curve that used to scare her. I cheered when she made it down. She beamed, climbed into my lap, and said, "You're more fun than Mommy." That evening, Megan asked to set some boundaries. Her voice was calm. Even. But the words came with weight. "She's at an impressionable age," she said. "We're just trying to keep consistency." I nodded. What else could I do? Another time, Sam scraped his knee. I cleaned it gently, kissed the top of his head. He asked if I could tuck him in that night. Megan overheard. Her smile tightened. "Let's keep bedtime for Mommy and Daddy, okay?" And slowly, the warm rhythms of care became cold routines of caution. One morning, I left a note offering to cover part of the mortgage. "Just to help," I wrote. "Just until I find my footing." The envelope disappeared. Megan never said a word. But the next day, I overheard her on a video call. "We're carrying a lot right now," she told someone. "Tyler's mom means well, but she doesn't really understand modern parenting. And it's like, she keeps trying to insert herself into everything." I stood behind the half-closed door, tea in hand, and felt the heat rush up my neck. Later that week, Tyler asked if I could watch the kids for a few nights. They were planning a vacation. Just the two of them. Said it would be great for their marriage. I smiled. Of course, I said. No mention of where they were going. No invite. No family plan. Just a quiet assumption, I would stay, and they would go. And I did stay. I read bedtime stories, cleaned up spilled cereal, braided Ellie's hair, and fixed the broken towel rack in the upstairs bathroom. The kids didn't ask where their parents went. They were just happy I was there. One night, Sam woke from a nightmare. I let him crawl into the guest bed beside me. He whispered, "I don't like when they're gone." I held him close and said nothing. When Megan and Tyler returned, they brought back fridge magnets and a souvenir sippy cup. Megan handed it to me like a trophy. They didn't miss us too much, did they? I said no. She smiled, a little too broadly, then said, "Next time, maybe we'll go longer." I nodded. But something in me had shifted again. The kind of shift that doesn't show on your face but stays in your bones. Then came the lawyer's office. Tyler barely explained why we were going. Just said it was about sorting out Dad's will stuff. I dressed simply, wore the navy blouse my husband always said made my eyes look less tired. The room was beige and quiet. The lawyer read the will aloud. To my wife, Nancy, I leave the family lodge in Kentucky. Megan let out a short laugh. Sharp. Uncontained. That wreck, she said, glancing at Tyler. We don't need you, take that wreck. She stood, brushing imaginary lint from her sleeve. Come on. Let her go play mountain woman or whatever. Tyler rose beside her. He didn't speak. Didn't look at me. I stared at him for a long moment. And he didn't meet my eyes. Not even once. The rest of the room blurred. I heard the lawyer say something about paperwork. My name. My signature. But I'd already left, inwardly, at least. I signed. Gathered my purse. Walked out into the sunlight and felt something collapse, quietly, inside me. I didn't say goodbye. I just drove. 6 hours through winding roads and half-remembered towns. Past old gas stations and barns leaning into their own ruin. I arrived at the lodge just before dusk. It was smaller than I remembered. Mustier. The screen door hung crooked on one hinge. Inside, it smelled of damp wood and mice. But the fireplace still worked. I lit it. Unpacked my books. Set a kettle to boil. And sat. There were no voices asking things of me. No sideways glances. No lists of rules disguised as advice. Only wind brushing the pines, the creak of old floorboards, the warmth of a fire. That night, I cried. Not loudly. Just slow tears that slipped into the folds of my pillow. Grief, betrayal, exhaustion, all of it finally allowed to land. But in the morning, something was clearer. I swept. I aired out closets. I scrubbed the mold from the window corners. I made eggs in a dented skillet and listened to a station that played 70s soft rock. And I began to wonder, what if this wasn't exile? What if this was the beginning? The lodge had always been a strange kind of inheritance. My husband never used it much. It had belonged to his grandfather, a stern man who hunted deer and kept whiskey in a locked drawer. We visited twice in our early marriage. Once for a fall weekend. Once to clear out some of the old rifles. After that, it sat empty. But now, it was mine. I moved slowly through its corners, taking stock. There were spiders in the pantry, and a squirrel had chewed through the linen drawer. But the bones of the place were solid, thick beams, wide plank floors, a stone hearth that still radiated warmth after midnight. I began to settle into the rhythms of the place. Days passed, then weeks. I learned the way light moved across the living room wall from 6 a.m. to dusk. I cleared the garden bed behind the shed, not to plant anything useful, just to see if I still could. I found a battered radio and started tuning into local weather reports and the occasional bluegrass program. I wasn't lonely, not yet. I was still too tired for loneliness. There was something soothing about the work. About not being needed. And then, on a Thursday, in the cellar, I found the box. It wasn't hidden, exactly, just forgotten. Wedged under an old shelving unit and covered with rags. Inside were 3 thick binders, yellowed and musty. One had a faded label that read El Morales Survey 1973. Another had a map, hand-drawn, with the words Caldwell Ridge Deposit circled in red pencil. There were letters too, typed and signed. Discussions about copper, traces of lithium, preliminary test drills. I sat on the cold cement floor, paging through them slowly. It meant nothing at first, just old papers. But curiosity bloomed. That night, I called a geologist whose name I found in a local directory. Just a question, I said. Nothing urgent. He came the next morning. The truck was loud, his boots louder. He was kind, curious, more animated than I expected. He spent 2 hours walking the land, holding instruments I didn't understand. When he returned, he said, "This land could be something, ma'am." I nodded. Then I called a lawyer. Then the mining company. Weeks blurred into meetings, phone calls, paperwork. By the time I had a formal offer in hand, $3.8 million to lease the mineral rights for 20 years, I was no longer surprised. Just steady. Like I'd been expecting something like this, all along, without knowing. I said nothing to Tyler or Megan. I had not heard from them since the will reading. But I knew it wouldn't be long. And I was right. A week later, the phone rang. "Mom," Tyler said, too brightly. "Hey. Listen, we've got a weird situation." I let him talk. He explained, haltingly, that their mortgage company had flagged a discrepancy. Something about the property line. Something about mineral rights. Something about the lodge and its overlapping zone. "Apparently, part of our subdivision sits on land that connects to yours," he said. "I don't really understand it. But they said the rights need to be signed over, or it could delay refinancing." I said nothing. Then Megan got on the line. Her voice was different now, soft, a little hoarse, like she'd rehearsed it in the mirror. "Maybe we were a little harsh," she said. "I know things got tense. But we all say things we don't mean, right?" She paused, waiting. I looked out the window. Fog rolled low across the ridge, quiet and unbothered. "We were thinking," she went on, "maybe we could come visit. Talk in person." "Bring the kids?" I said, "Let me think about it." She exhaled, relieved. "Of course. Take your time." They called again the next day. Left a message. Said they'd drive up that weekend. And they did. The car pulled in just before noon on Saturday. Clean. Polished. Megan stepped out first, wearing a cashmere sweater and a forced smile. Tyler followed, slower, eyes cautious. They knocked. I opened the door. Megan extended a casserole dish. "We brought lasagna." I nodded. They stood awkwardly in the living room, scanning the lodge like they were inside a stranger's story. "We could build you a little place," Megan said finally, setting the dish on the counter. "Over the garage, maybe. Make it comfortable." I turned to her. "You once told me to take this wreck and get out of your life." She flushed. That was, emotions were high. Tyler opened his mouth, then closed it. "You made a choice," I said. "And so did I." Megan's voice tightened. "So that's it? You won't even help your own family?" I looked at her, then at Tyler. I did. 4 years. I walked them to the door. This is me finally helping myself. They stood there, unsure. Then they left. And the quiet returned. After they left, I didn't move from the porch for a long time. The lasagna sat untouched on the counter. I watched the curve of their car disappear behind the trees and listened for silence. When it came, it wasn't empty. It was full of relief, of air finally unshared. That night, I stoked the fire early. I laid out the quilt I'd sewn when Tyler was born, the one with frayed stars in blue and gold. I spread it across the armchair and sat with my journal. The lamp gave off a gentle hum. Outside, a fox crossed the far tree line. I'd seen her before, small, quick, sure-footed. I wrote a single sentence: I am not a cautionary tale. I am a woman who stepped away. The next morning, I cleaned the dish without tasting what they brought. I wrapped it in wax paper and left it on the steps of the church in town with a note: please enjoy. No return needed. Every so often, someone from the town would knock: Maggie from the diner, who brought blueberry muffins and asked about the fireplace, Jim from the hardware store, who helped me repair the gutter spout and stayed for coffee. No one asked too many questions. They seemed to sense I was a woman who had earned her quiet. With the first check from the mining company, I didn't do anything grand. I replaced the broken window. Hired a local contractor to install solar panels. Bought a new kettle. Nothing flashy. Just necessary things. The kind of choices people don't notice, unless they've gone without them. I started hiking, slow at first. Short trails, then longer. I learned the names of birds again. Warblers. Grosbeaks. Each one with its own song. I kept a field guide near the door. One Thursday afternoon, I joined a ceramics class at the library in town. We sat in a circle of folding chairs, hands covered in slip, trying to shape bowls that didn't wobble. I wasn't good at it, not at first. But I laughed. And that was more than I'd done in months. At night, I played music. Not loudly. Just low enough to fill the corners. I liked the sound of cello. And French press coffee in the morning, made slowly, with both hands steady. I sent Christmas cards that year. One to the lawyer. One to the geologist. One to the postmistress who held my mail when I was still too tired to walk to the box. I did not send one to Tyler and Megan. Still, I thought about the kids. Often. I wondered if Sam still built Lego towers in rainbow order. If Ellie still believed the moon followed her at night. I missed their voices, their questions, their strange little rituals. I did not miss their parents. And yet, I did not harden. That surprised me most. I expected anger to take root. Bitterness. But what came instead was peace. Not perfection. Not ease. Just the quiet knowledge that I no longer had to audition for a place in anyone's life. The mining company sent a team to mark boundaries in spring. They stayed 2 days, mapped the slopes, took soil samples. One of them asked if I'd ever thought of selling the whole property outright. I smiled. No. Some things can't be bought. He didn't press. Instead, he handed me a business card. If you change your mind. I pinned it to the fridge behind a photo of Tyler as a boy, standing at the edge of a lake, holding a net and smiling like he'd just caught the world. That photo stayed. Not because I couldn't let go, but because I chose what to keep. The phone rang a few times. Megan, then Tyler. I didn't pick up. Their messages changed tone with each call, first casual, then cautious, then strained. We thought we might come up sometime, just to talk. Ellie made a card for you. We could use your help, just for a bit. I let them pile up like junk mail. I saved them all, but responded to none. Not because I wanted revenge. But because I was finally learning to trust my silence. And in that silence, I grew something of my own. A life. The crate in the cellar had more than maps. I didn't notice it the first time, too overwhelmed by the mineral rights proposal, the sudden shift from neglected widow to landowner of consequence. But a few weeks later, when I returned for spare canning jars, I found it. A bundle of letters. Bound in twine, browned at the edges. Addressed to L. Morales in looping script. The return name was my husband's grandfather, James's grandfather, Henry Elwood. I had never known much about him. James said he was private, worked hard, died before we married. But here were pages of words, correspondence between two people who knew the soil better than the town. I brought them upstairs. Sat beside the stove with a pad of paper and began transcribing the letters, one by one. They spoke of negotiations, secrecy, suspicion about a rival company. And deep admiration. Henry had seen Luz not as an assistant, but as a partner. She'd signed her letters, Luz Morales, surveyor. Caldwell Ridge. A woman of precision. Of insight. Of maps and elevation and hope tucked between topographic lines. I found myself imagining her life. The boots she wore. The compass in her palm. How she must have walked these same hills with purpose. How little she probably asked for, and how much she gave. In town, I asked Maggie if she'd ever heard the name. She frowned, wiped her hands on a dish towel. Morales. There was a family lived on the ridge decades ago. One girl was smart as a whip. Left town. Nobody knew what happened after. I nodded. Didn't say more. That night, I pulled out the survey map and pinned it to the kitchen wall. Red pencil still visible. A careful hand, drawing meaning from land others had dismissed as wild. There was power in that. In quiet legacy. That week, the second payment came in from the mining company. I stared at the deposit slip for a long time. 7 digits. Clean. Final. I made copies and filed them in a folder marked simply Caldwell. Still, I told no one. The post office box I'd set up in town kept things tidy. The lawyer's number on speed dial gave me assurance. Every account I opened, I kept in my own name. Every transaction required a handwritten signature. No more shared access. No more quiet permissions. One afternoon, a white SUV pulled into the clearing. I watched from the window as the driver hesitated, then reversed out of view. Tyler. I didn't go outside. He didn't knock. 2 days later, a letter arrived. Just 2 paragraphs. Mom, I know we haven't earned forgiveness, but I hope it's not too late to ask for a little grace. Megan and I are struggling. We made mistakes. We let pride get in the way. The kids ask about you constantly. I didn't respond. Instead, I made stew from scratch and brought a bowl to old Marlene down the hill, who'd been having trouble with her knees. She smiled, patted my hand, and said, "You've got the kind of peace money can't buy." Maybe. But the money helped. I'd bought a better generator. Upgraded the plumbing. Started paying for repairs in town anonymously, roofs fixed, windows replaced, school supplies donated under the name Morales Foundation. Not to be noble. But because I finally could. The next month, a small envelope came tucked between utility bills. No return address. Inside was a crayon drawing, Ellie's unmistakable style. A stick figure with curly gray hair, standing next to a tall pine. The words "I miss you, Grandma," scribbled in the corner. I folded it gently and placed it in my journal. That evening, I sat with a cup of tea and stared at the hearth, now fitted with a new grate. The firelight played on the map pinned beside me. Tyler and Megan would come again. I knew that. But I also knew this: the woman they'd find wasn't the one they sent away. I had made a home here, not because I was forced to, but because I chose to. That distinction mattered. And I would never forget it. It was late April when they came again. The air smelled of pine sap and thawing earth, and the birds were louder than usual, full of plans and motion. I had just finished tying up the new rose shoots along the porch railing when I heard the crunch of tires over gravel. A different car this time. Dark gray sedan, rental plates. Tyler stepped out first. He looked thinner. Paler. Like a man who had started shrinking into himself. Megan followed, her movements slower, less clipped than before. She held Ellie's hand. Sam climbed out after, blinking at the sky like it was a light too bright to trust. They approached the steps but didn't come up. Megan's voice was low. We weren't sure if you'd let us." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I opened the screen door and stepped aside. The children rushed forward. They didn't hesitate. Ellie wrapped herself around my waist. Sam pressed his head into my ribs like he had the night of that bad dream, so many months ago. For a moment, I let myself close my eyes and hold them. But only for a moment. Megan lingered at the bottom of the steps, her mouth twitching like it wanted to form an apology but hadn't yet decided if it was worth the cost. "We brought lunch," she said, lifting a bag. "Just sandwiches. Nothing fancy." Tyler was looking at the ground, as though unsure whether he was a guest or a trespasser. We ate outside, at the long table I had scrubbed clean for spring. The sandwiches were fine. Store-bought. The kind made in a hurry by people who want to do the right thing but don't quite know how. The children chattered. Ellie asked about the foxes. Sam wanted to see the old fireplace. I told them maybe later. For now, just eat. Megan tried to make conversation. I answered only what needed answering. Not coldly. Just, clearly. After lunch, the kids asked to walk down to the stream. I nodded. Megan followed them, offering to give us a minute. Tyler stayed seated. His hands were on his lap, fingers interlocked. He stared at the treeline. "I've made a mess of things," he said quietly. I didn't reply. I let her speak for both of us. I let comfort turn into cruelty. I know that now. The wind moved through the tall grass behind us. "I never meant to push you out." I looked at him then. "You didn't," I said. "You just left the door open and waited for me to walk through it." He winced. Not defensively. Just truthfully. We sat for a while in the hush of mid-afternoon. He asked about the lodge. The upgrades. The mining proposal. I told him the basics. Enough for him to understand this was no longer a place he could casually dismiss. He nodded slowly. "I heard you set up a foundation." I nodded back. "For education," I said. "And emergency housing. Some things deserve protection." Was that, he paused. Was that for us? "No," I said. "It was in spite of you." He didn't flinch. Instead, he said, "Thank you." I didn't answer. That night, they left quietly. No drama. Just a wave from the children, and a look from Megan that hovered somewhere between sorrow and understanding. When the car disappeared, I walked back inside. The drawing Ellie had made sat on my desk. I took it down, folded it once, and tucked it in the old Morales folder with the maps and deeds. Something about that felt right. That night, the wind came strong off the ridge. The house creaked in familiar rhythms. I lit a single candle and wrote in my journal. They came. They saw. They did not stay. And for the first time since they'd returned, I felt something close to peace again. Summer came slowly to Caldwell Ridge. The frost finally left the soil, the creek ran faster, and the garden I had carved from stubborn clay began to bloom. I planted zinnias, mostly. A little wild for some tastes, colorful, messy, hard to predict. But they grew with determination, like they had something to prove. I liked that about them. The lodge had grown, too. Not in size, but in feeling. The cold corners had warmed. The walls, once lined with neglect, now held small comforts, shelves of books, hand-thrown bowls from ceramics class, a quilt I patched from scraps of old flannel shirts. I started leaving the front door open in the mornings, letting in birdsong and breeze. I found myself humming again. And for the most part, Tyler and Megan left me alone. There were occasional texts. Megan sent photos of the kids, Sam holding a pine cone, Ellie with a gap-toothed smile. I always wrote back. Briefly. kindly, but never inviting. Then, one Saturday in July, an envelope came by registered mail. My name, typed in block letters. No return address. Inside, documents, stapled and stiff. A letter at the front, written in Megan's handwriting. She was filing for divorce. I sat at the kitchen table, rereading her words. Not with surprise, but with the weight of recognition. The cracks had been there all along. Tyler's passivity, Megan's need for control, the fault lines of two people who mistook politeness for partnership. Her letter wasn't cruel. It wasn't even angry. It was tired. A tiredness I knew too well, the kind that comes from building something on sand. She didn't ask for help. Not directly. But she mentioned custody. The children staying with her for now. Hinted at finances. The house. That evening, Tyler called. He didn't lead with the divorce. He asked how the Roses were doing. Then he said, "It's real. It's happening. I signed the papers yesterday." I listened. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He just sounded blank. She said I changed. That I never stand up for anything. He paused. Maybe she's right. I said nothing. I wasn't there to absolve him. But before we hung up, I said, "You have a second chance now. Don't waste it repeating the first." 3 days later, he showed up with just a duffel bag and a tired smile. Asked if he could stay just a couple days. I told him the guest cot was in the back. Sheets were clean. Meals were at 6, dishes washed by the one who didn't cook. He nodded. Didn't argue. For 2 days, we shared space and silence. He chopped wood without being asked. Fixed a screen on the porch. Drank coffee without looking at his phone. On the third night, he said, "I never asked about the mining money." I looked at him over my glasses. "No. You didn't." He nodded slowly. "I don't want anything." I believed him. That was the most honest thing he'd said in years. He left the next morning. Thanked me. Hugged me, not as a son trying to soothe guilt, but as a man who understood the hug might not be returned. I closed the door behind him and leaned against the frame for a long time. Later, I found a note he'd left on the kitchen table. I see it now. "I'm sorry I made you small in a house you helped build. I hope someday I grow big enough to be in yours." I tucked the note behind the photo of him at the lake. Let it stay. Autumn came early that year. The air thinned. The garden began to brown at the edges. I harvested the last of the herbs, dried them by the stove. The mining company sent another check, larger than the last. I donated most of it. Opened a scholarship fund under the name Luz Morales. I imagined her name printed on envelopes. Read aloud at school assemblies. A quiet nod to a woman who once mapped the worth of this place with nothing but her boots and her will. I stopped needing to explain my choices. People in town treated me with a kind of respect I hadn't known in years, not because they knew what I'd done, but because I didn't ask for anything. I simply showed up. Paid in cash. Said please and thank you. Gave without asking for credit. I belonged, and I didn't. And that was enough. The winter came without snow, just a long gray hush that settled over the ridge like a worn blanket. The kind of cold that didn't bite, just lingered, quiet, steady, heavy in the bones. Inside the lodge, I kept the fire going. Wore wool socks. Made lentil soup from scratch. I read through the stack of books I'd been collecting all year, underlining things that sounded like truth. I wrote, too, not letters, not journals, but small, spare notes. Observations. One day, I found myself writing the phrase, "Peace is louder than applause." I pinned it to the kitchen wall beside the old survey map. The mining company renewed the lease in December. They asked if I'd be open to media coverage, some kind of press story about women in legacy land ownership. I declined. I didn't want to be profiled. I didn't want to be posed in front of a fireplace holding a mug. This place was mine because I had endured it first, scrubbed it, repaired it, warmed it with my own presence after being told it was a wreck. I had carried silence like a weight for decades. I didn't need to perform my freedom. One morning, while brushing the porch steps clear of frost, I saw a figure down the road. Small, bundled in a coat 2 sizes too big. Ellie. She waved. In her other hand was a tote bag and a cardboard box. I met her halfway down the drive. She grinned, breath misting. Dad brought me halfway. Said I could come for the weekend if it was okay with you. I blinked. You came alone? Just walked from the turnoff. I remembered the way. She handed me the box. It's our old Lego set. Sam wanted to come but he's got a cold. I opened the lid. Inside were neat rows of color-coded bricks and a little note, folded and childlike, I miss making things with you. I brought her in. Made cocoa. We sat by the fire and she built a tower while I peeled apples for pie. That night, she read aloud from a book I used to keep beside my bed. She stumbled over the big words, and I let her try them twice before helping. When she yawned, I tucked her into the cot with my old quilt. She whispered, I like it better here. It doesn't feel like anyone's rushing. I sat beside her for a while, watching the firelight flicker against the log walls. She stayed 2 nights. On Sunday, Tyler came to pick her up. He didn't come in. Just waited by the car. As she got in, she turned and waved. Next time, can we hike to the ridge? I nodded. We'll pack sandwiches. The car pulled away, and I went back inside. The quilt still held her shape. That week, I started teaching ceramics again, just a weekly class at the library. I didn't call it teaching, really. Just clay Thursdays. People came. We shaped things. I brought muffins. A man named Ray, who'd lost his wife the year before, gave me a crooked bowl with a thumbprint pressed into the side. He said, it's not much, but I made it. I said, that's enough. We didn't say more. By spring, I had planted more zinnias, patched the roof again, and ordered new fencing for the garden. I bought a weather radio. I started leaving a light on the porch for no one in particular. And still, no one asked me to explain myself. One day, I drove into town, stopped at the diner, and left a note for Maggie with the cashier. It simply said, thank you for feeding me when I hadn't yet remembered how to feed myself. I didn't sign it. She knew. Later that season, I got a letter from Megan. Not typed. Handwritten. Careful loops. No apology, just 4 pages of reflection. She wrote about the way marriage made her feel like she had to be strong all the time. How being a mother made her competitive without realizing. She said she'd always envied how quiet I was. I thought it meant you didn't see me. But now I know you saw everything. At the end, she added, I don't expect a reply. I just wanted you to know that I know. I folded it. Placed it behind Ellie's drawing in the Morales folder. Forgiveness, I've learned, doesn't need to be declared. It just needs to stop being resisted. By midsummer, I had what I never thought I'd find again. Not love. Not family. Not safety. Freedom. And it was mine alone. 6 months passed. Not quickly, not slowly, just steadily, like a brook that never rushes but never stops. The lodge settled into itself as if it remembered how to be lived in. I stopped counting the days between visits, stopped checking the phone for messages I didn't want. I stopped needing to justify what I had become. Then, one afternoon in early October, the phone rang. It was Tyler. I let it buzz once. Twice. Then I picked up. Hi, Mom, he said. His voice was soft, the kind of soft that has nothing to hide behind. I just wanted to let you know. Megan and I separated. I didn't speak. I waited. The kids ask about you a lot. Still, I said nothing. We're figuring things out. Slowly. I've been seeing them more. Just weekends for now. He paused. Ellie's been writing you letters. She didn't want to send them until she knew if you'd still want them. I exhaled. Can we visit? He asked. All three of us. Just for a day. No pressure. I thought maybe we could bring Stu. Yours never tastes the same when I try. Something in me loosened. Not forgiveness, not hope. Just the place where a door might open again, slowly, if knocked upon gently enough. I said yes. They arrived on a Sunday. Ellie bounded out of the car first, holding a lopsided bouquet of wildflowers. Sam followed, more reserved now, like a boy suddenly aware of time and space and how people can disappear. Tyler walked with the stew pot, 2 jars of pickles, and a box of cornbread mix. The lodge didn't mind the crowd. It held them like it held me, quietly, expectantly, without judgment. We ate at the table. The kids talked about school. Sam had discovered a love for space, Ellie was learning to play piano. Tyler washed the dishes without being asked. No one mentioned Megan. No one spoke of the past directly. But I could feel it in the way he folded the dish towel with care, the way his eyes lingered on the fire like it held both comfort and regret. After lunch, the children went outside to chase the last of the falling leaves. Tyler sat across from me, a mug of tea in hand. I wanted to say thank you, he said, for letting us come. I nodded. They don't ask about Megan much, he added. It worries me, how easily they accept things. I stirred my tea. They accept love when they feel it, I said. And distance when it's familiar. He looked down. I think I let her build the house, and I just lived in it. Then build your own now, I said. Even if it's small. He smiled, tired but honest. When the sun began to drop, I packed them some leftovers and stood at the door while they loaded the car. The kids waved, called promises of return, asked if next time they could bring their puzzles. I nodded. Tyler lingered last. He didn't ask to stay. He didn't ask for anything. He just said, I'm sorry it took so long to see you. And I said, seeing takes time. You were raised in a house with curtains. He laughed, quietly. Then turned and got into the car. I waved until the taillights disappeared around the bend. But I didn't cry. And I didn't invite them to stay. I keep a drawer now, just one, where I store the parts of my life I don't want to forget, but don't need to display. Inside, a drawing from Ellie, a note from Tyler, a few Polaroids from that first winter alone. The deed to the land. A photo of James, younger than I ever saw him, grinning beside an old pickup. One of Luz Morales' letters, folded carefully, kept not for its value, but for its clarity. Her handwriting reminds me that maps can be made out of faith, not just facts. I used to think the worst thing that could happen was being erased. But it turns out, it's being rewritten by someone else. And what I did, quietly, without ceremony, was take back the pen. There were no speeches. No confrontations. Just choices. One after another. Quiet refusals. Restraint as resolve. People ask me, sometimes, what changed. I tell them, nothing changed. I just started listening to the part of myself that had been whispering all along. There was no revenge. No grand gesture. I didn't slam a single door. I simply stopped opening the ones that always led to hurt. And in doing so, I walked into a different kind of home. Here, at Caldwell Ridge, the days end earlier and the nights are longer. But there's warmth. There's silence. There's the comfort of knowing no one is measuring my worth in usefulness or obedience. I am not a guest here. I am not a burden waiting to be managed. I am not waiting. There are mornings I still hear Megan's voice in my memory, light, dismissive, vaguely amused. And Tyler's silence beside her. I let those voices come, and then I let them pass, like clouds that have nothing to do with the weather under my roof. Sometimes Ellie calls. She plays a song she's learning or asks what kind of birds I've seen. She never asks why I left. And I never explain. She doesn't need the whole story. Just the part where I'm still here. Still myself. This land still breathes around me. The garden with its crooked zinnias. The ridge, weathered but holding. The kitchen, always warm by 5 o'clock. A pot of soup simmering, even if no one's coming. I do not miss who I was in their house. I do not mourn the woman who tried to fold herself small enough to stay. Because she was never meant to stay. She was meant to leave. To find the shape of her own life. And I did. I wasn't lost. I just stopped playing the role they cast me in. And once I stepped out of that script, I finally remembered who I was.